Mandrake got into a very long story arc, which lasted the better part of a year. It was called The Haunting of America. And boy, is it a timely storyline, folks, given what's going on in the United States right now. Uh, this is a story arc which I would certainly encourage a number of fans to read, because I think a number of fans could really relate to certain themes that are within this arc. What's really neat about the Haunting of America arc is that there isn't a whole lot of character development for the Spectre. I think at this point, Mr. Ostrander-Mandrake said, we've done a lot of development of Jim Corrigan's character. We've given a whole added layer to his origin. We've made his relationship with the Spectre, with Michael, with God, that much more complex. We've reintroduced a whole host of new and old supporting characters. After all this world building, let's have some fun and tell a long story arc in which we get to see new characters brought in, and the focus isn't going to be on the balance between Jim Corrigan and the Spectre. Let's have the Spectre go out there and be the Spectre and be involved in this ongoing storyline. Just like, you think of Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman. I mean, they have so many stories where the focus isn't on their origin or adding something new to their character. They're just on this long adventure. And so I think that's what Mr. Ostrander-Mandrake wanted to do for Jim Corrigan. It's a really neat storyline. In it, Corrigan, the Spectre, and Nate Kane, they go on a cross-country journey to collect the pieces of the broken American talisman. And it's explained at the start of this arc that when the United States Constitution was drafted, a group of politicians decided that, well, the Constitution represented the political structure of America. A talisman needed to be created to represent the spiritual ideology of the United States. And so a talisman was created. It was imbued with a special spiritual power, and the talisman was used at points in the 1800s to create such iconic figures as Brother Jonathan and later Uncle Sam. My interpretation is that the Uncle Sam that we see in flashback scenes in this arc is not the same man as Uncle Sam from the Freedom Fighters. And it's explained that over time the talisman was broken. However, the pieces found themselves scattered across America, and if a person manages to pick up a piece of a talisman, it can imbue them with a certain amount of power. We're introduced to an Illuminati type group called the National Interest, and the National Interest wants to rebuild the talisman and use the power of the talisman to establish the group's power over all of America. There's a subplot with an alien called the Sorcerer who crashed in the United States some years before, and its suit of armor has been co-opted by the National Interest. We also see at the end of this long story arc the birth of a new hero, the Patriot. And the Patriot is a gestalt, you would say, of several American citizens who agreed to sacrifice their individual spirituality to form the Patriot, and he represents the new spiritual ideology of America. And the Patriot also represents the greater cultural diversity of the United States of America. And so a Spectre plays a part in the birth of this hero. So, like I said a couple of minutes ago, no groundbreaking revelations, I would say, in terms of the Spectre's past. However, we do get a couple of neat points of character development for the Spectre, nonetheless, in this arc. One really neat thing is that we learn exactly how old Jim Corrigan is. It's important to keep in mind that during Zero Hour and shortly thereafter, writers had the freedom to tighten down the ages of the characters who they were writing. For instance, if you did the math in various Superman books, you would find that Superman was 35 and Batman was 33, which I think are pretty good. Person who's 33, 35, they're still young, but they're not too young, so they're at their prime or just reaching their prime. I think for younger readers, that's good. To a younger reader, someone in their 30s is old. So just imagine for a kid how old 40-something-year-old appears to be. So now Ostrander-Mandrake had their turn with Jim Corrigan, and it comes about in a neat exchange between Nate and Jim Corrigan as they're traveling by train. And this is really neat because, of course, as a Spectre, Jim could simply teleport himself and Nate wherever. But being a man out of the 1930s, Jim would be used to traveling by train. And so, much to Nate's chagrin, he finds that he has to come up with excuses for the captain as to why he and Jim are traveling so far and why they're traveling by train. And so there's this one neat exchange on the train where Nate looks at Jim and says, I tend to forget that I'm younger than you. On the surface, I look older than you. My guess is that Nate's somewhere in his late 40s, early 50s. But Nate says, I may look older than you, but the truth is you're much older than me. And Jim says, yes, indeed. I was born in 1903. So this is neat. We could piece together that Jim was 36, 37 when he became the Spectre. We also learned that when Jim was in his early teens, he lied about his age, and he enlisted in the U.S. Army and saw some action during World War I. And that's pretty neat because going through the horrors of World War I would certainly be a contributing factor to Jim Corrigan becoming that hard-hearted, hard-boiled detective later in life. We also learn over the course of the story arc that Jim Corrigan is homophobic. There's this interesting chapter in the story arc in which a priest is encouraging his parishioners to go out and punish members of the LGBTQ community. And so in the opening of this chapter, we see a homosexual couple being accosted by a group of parishioners in an alleyway, and one of the partners is clubbed to death. The Spectre intervenes, punishes the one parishioner who killed the man. But then when the man's partner says, wait, aren't you going to do something to the other guys? Spectre says, no, an eye for an eye, punishment has been served, and he exits. And Nate catches up with Corrigan later and says, that was rather fast. What's with you? You tend to like drawing out this punishment. What's the deal here? Why so quick? And Corrigan actually says, and I'm using the word that Ostrander used, so please excuse me for this, but Corrigan literally says, I don't like faggots. And Nate's response is, well, I don't feel comfortable about how homosexuals live their lives, but they're human beings, and they are entitled to the same rights under the law and the same treatment in the eyes of the law as heterosexual people. So you go think about that. So Jim turns next to Father Kramer, and again, in talking with Father Kramer, Jim uses that F word. And Kramer's response is really nice because, of course, by this point we see Father Kramer is a very patient, understanding, forgiving man. And Kramer asks simply, Jim, what if I told you that I was gay? How would you respond? And Jim doesn't have an answer. He excuses himself, of course, claims that he has other business to attend to. But Corrigan gets a pretty interesting lesson later on in this chapter as things are boiling over between protesters from the LGBT community and this priest who has acquired a piece of a talisman. And with the piece of talisman, he manifests himself in a quasi-image of the Archangel Michael, and he claims to be Michael. And this drives the Spectre into a rage, and he's about to kill the priest when a couple of members from the LGBTQ community step in and say, no, the violence has to stop. Trust has to be built. There must be reconciliation. One side must take the higher moral ground, and it will be us. Please do not punish him. Do not kill him. And so that impresses the Spectre, and he decides not to kill the priest. And in the end, he goes back to Father Kramer once again as Jim Corrigan and apologizes for having made such a rushed exit. He says, Father, I'm still not comfortable with homosexuals, but I was thinking about your question, and our friendship is what matters the most. So if you were to tell me that you were gay, it would not end our friendship. And Kramer smiles and says, Jim, I never said I was gay. I mean, whether I'm gay or not, that's none of your business. But I just asked you what you would do if I said that I was gay. So it's really neat in that Jim Corrigan doesn't become somebody who is in favor of those who identify as homosexual, but his eyes have been opened up to the fact that people who are from the LGBT community are certainly not evil people. They don't deserve to be treated any lesser than other human beings. And I really like how Ostrander wrote this. It does not come across as a preachy issue. Nate comes across as being very human. Just a really well-written issue that I think could serve as a really strong example for writers even today. So folks, I'm going to pick up with the Haunting of America arc in part 6 of episode 124, coming your way in a couple of weeks' time. The email is comicsandhistory@gmail.com. Until those 14 days have coming on, this class is dismissed.